Pick any wife for free, the judge laughed. But when the billionaire pointed to the black maid, they were mocking. The room went silent. What started as a cruel joke turned into a shocking declaration no one expected. The maid, humiliated, confused, never imagined the billionaire would defend her in front of everyone. But the real twist came later that night, when her little boy whispered the words that stopped him cold. "Mommy says you're my daddy. Now." The truth about the past threatens to change everything. Gossip spreads like fire. Secrets begin to unravel. And a powerful man must choose between his reputation and the family he never knew he had. Will love be strong enough to silence a town full of hate? Or will this shocking choice destroy them all? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today if you enjoy stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe for more of their grand courthouse ballroom sparkled like a jewel box come to life. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors, polished to a mirror shine. The annual charity auction had drawn out Millbrook's finest, their wealth on full display. Ladies dripped with diamonds while their husbands adjusted bow ties beneath. Perfectly tailored tuxedos. Judge Holloway stood at the gleaming mahogany podium, his round face flushed with self-importance as he addressed the crowd. His voice boomed through the microphone, carrying that peculiar mix of southern charm and condescension that marked him as old money. "And now, ladies and gentlemen," he drawled, pausing for effect, "we come to our most eligible bachelor, the esteemed Grant Whitmore." He gestured toward a tall, distinguished man standing quietly near the back of the room. Why, with his billions, he could buy anything here tonight. But I say, Mr. Whitmore, you can pick any wife you want for free. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. Grant shifted uncomfortably, his expression tight. He'd never enjoyed being the center of attention, especially not for his wealth. Near the refreshment table, Lena Johnson moved quietly between the guests, her black uniform marking her as service staff. Her hands were steady as she offered champagne flutes on a silver tray, though inside her heart pounded at the cruel undertones of the evening's entertainment. Oh, look at her, trying so hard to be invisible. A woman in a red sequined gown stage whispered to her companion. Both tittered behind their hands. "Well, she's doing a wonderful job of it," another socialite chimed in. "I barely noticed the help exists at all." Lena kept her chin up, her dignity wrapped around her like armor. She'd endured far worse in her years of service. But each barb still stung. Grant watched the scene unfold, his jaw tightening. He'd been raised in wealth, but had never developed a taste for casual cruelty. His gaze followed Lena as she worked, noting the grace with which she handled the mockery. Judge Holloway, encouraged by the laughter, decided to push his joke further. He pointed directly at Lena, his gesture loose from too many glasses of champagne. "Why, Mr. Whitmore, you could even choose our invisible serving girl here." His voice dripped with mockery. The crowd erupted in mean-spirited laughter. Some guests nearly doubled over, as if the mere suggestion was the height of comedy. Lena froze, the tray trembling slightly in her hands. Her face a mask of carefully controlled emotion. In that moment, something snapped in Grant Whitmore. He'd spent too many years watching from the sidelines, allowing such behavior to continue unchallenged. He rose to his full height, his voice cutting through the laughter like a blade. "Then I'll choose the one you're mocking." The words fell into sudden silence. Gasps echoed through the ballroom as the crowd processed what they'd just heard. Crystal glasses clinked as hands went slack with shock. All eyes darted between Grant's stern face and Lena's stunned expression. The air electric with disbelief. The ballroom plunged into a deafening silence. Camera flashes erupted like lightning, capturing the scandal unfolding before Millbrook's elite. Lena's hands trembled violently, the silver tray wobbling precariously as crystal glasses clinked against each other. She steadied herself against a nearby column, her chest tight with shock and embarrassment. Judge Holloway's laugh cut through the tension, a forced, uncomfortable sound that echoed in the quiet room. Now, Mr. Whitmore," he said, tugging at his bow tie. "Surely you're joking." We all enjoy a good jest, but the whispers had already begun, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. How dare he? This is preposterous. What is he thinking? Mrs. Covington, dripping in pearls and self-importance, pressed a manicured hand to her chest. Well, I never. She declared loudly enough for everyone to hear. Other society women clustered together, their faces twisted with outrage and disgust. Grant moved through the crowd with purpose, his tall frame commanding attention as he made his way to where Lena stood frozen. The guests parted before him like the Red Sea, creating a path while pretending not to stare. Miss Johnson, he said softly, taking the tray from her shaking hands and setting it aside. I apologize if I've caused you distress. That wasn't my intention at all. His voice was gentle, meant only for her ears. I couldn't stand by and watch them mock you. You deserve better than that, better than their cruel jokes and dismissive attitudes. Lena's spine stiffened, her shoulders squaring despite her internal turmoil. Mr. Whitmore, she whispered, I don't need your pity or your protection. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying her emotions even as she tried to maintain her composure. The auction stumbled to an awkward close, with Judge Holloway rushing through the final items as if eager to end the evening's unexpected drama. People began filtering out of the ballroom, their hushed conversations thick with scandal and speculation in the parking lot. The spring night air carried the scent of magnolias and the weight of social upheaval. Lena hurried toward the bus stop, her practical black shoes clicking against the pavement. Please, let me drive you home, Grant called after her, catching up easily with his long strides. It's late, and the buses aren't safe at this hour. No, thank you. Mr. Whitmore, Lena replied firmly, clutching her purse tighter. I've managed just fine on my own for years. I insist, he said, not unkindly, but with determination. After the commotion I caused, it's the least I can do. The tension between them crackled in the night air, heavy with unspoken words and the weight of social boundaries being challenged. After a long moment, Lena nodded reluctantly, following him to his car while keeping a careful distance between them. Grant's sleek black Mercedes purred to life, its headlights cutting through the darkness as they pulled away from the courthouse. Inside, the leather seats creaked softly as Lena sat rigid in the passenger seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The interior smelled of expensive leather and pine, a stark contrast to the worn buses she usually rode home. The first few minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the gentle hum of the engine and the occasional click of the turn signal. Streetlights swept across their faces in rhythmic patterns, illuminating the stark difference between them. Grant in his tailored tuxedo, Lena in her simple black uniform. You didn't have to do that, Lena finally said, her voice quiet but firm. Making a spectacle like that, it only makes things worse. She stared straight ahead, watching the familiar streets of Millbrook slide past her window. Grant's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. I couldn't just stand there, he replied, his deep voice carrying a note of barely contained anger. The way they were treating you, treating everyone who works there, it was cruel, unconscionable. And you think your grand gesture helped? Lena turned to face him, her eyes flashing. Tomorrow, I'll still have to work with those same people. Face their whispers, their stares. She shook her head. You get to drive away in your fancy car, Mr. Whitmore, but I have to live with the consequences. The car slowed for a red light, and Grant turned to look at her. I'm truly sorry, he said softly. I never meant to make things difficult for you. He paused, searching for the right words. I couldn't bear to watch them treat another human being that way. The casual cruelty of it all, it sickens me. The sincerity in his voice made Lena's carefully maintained walls waver slightly. Their eyes met in the dim light of the car, and for a brief moment, something passed between them. An understanding, perhaps, or a recognition of shared pain that transcended their different worlds. The light turned green, and Grant returned his attention to the road. They turned onto Cedar Street, where modest houses lined both sides. Lena's small home came into view, its white paint slightly faded but neat, with carefully tended flower boxes beneath the windows as they pulled up to the curb. The porch light flickered on, casting a warm yellow glow across the front steps. Through the living room window, a small figure could be seen peeking out from behind the curtain, a child's silhouette. Curious and waiting. "That's my son," Lena said softly, her voice changing, warming with maternal pride despite her earlier tension. The curtain twitched again as the small figure ducked back into the shadows. The car came to a gentle stop, its engine idling quietly in the night. The moments stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and possibilities neither dared to voice. The porch light cast a warm glow as Lena's trembling hand reached for her front door. Before she could turn the knob, a door flew open, and 5-year-old Eli burst out like a ray of sunshine. "Mommy." His small arms wrapped around her waist, his face pressed against her sequined uniform. Then his bright eyes caught sight of Grant, standing a few steps behind, and curiosity bloomed across his innocent face. "Who's that?" Eli whispered loudly, though Grant could clearly hear him. The boy's gaze traveled up Grant's tall frame, taking in his fancy tuxedo and polished shoes. "This is Mr. Whitmore," Lena said, softly, her voice catching. "He was kind enough to drive Mommy home from work." Eli stepped forward, his head tilted to one side as he studied Grant with unabashed interest. The businessman found himself smiling despite the tension of the evening, touched by the child's openness. Then everything changed. Eli reached out and tugged at Grant's sleeve, his small fingers grasping the expensive fabric. Standing on tiptoe, he whispered words that shattered the night. "Mommy says you're my daddy." The world seemed to stop spinning. Grant's smile froze, then faded as the meaning of those innocent words sank in. His head snapped toward Lena, who stood paralyzed in the doorway, her face a mask of horror. In that frozen moment, memories crashed over Grant like a tidal wave. A summer 5 years ago. The country club where he'd spent his days managing his family's business. A young woman working there, so different from the socialites who pursued him. Quiet, dignified, genuine. One night of comfort offered during her distress, a moment of kindness that had meant more than either had realized. The implications struck him like physical blows. The timing, the boy's age, the familiar shape of those eyes looking up at him with such trust. I need to go," Grant managed, his voice hoarse. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping on the porch steps. The perfectly controlled businessman was gone, replaced by a man whose world had just been turned upside down. He practically ran to his car, fumbling with his keys. The engine roared to life, and he pulled away from the curb too quickly, his tires squealing slightly on the asphalt. Through his rearview mirror, he caught one last glimpse. Lena standing in the doorway, her face a mixture of fear and resignation, while little Eli clung to her skirt, one small hand raised in farewell to the father he'd just met and lost in the space of a heartbeat. Sunlight streamed through the faded curtains of Lena's modest kitchen as she cracked eggs into a sizzling pan. Her hands trembled slightly, making the simple task more difficult than usual. Behind her, Eli sat at the small wooden table, humming happily as he waited for his breakfast. "Mommy, is Mr. Grant coming back today?" Eli's innocent question made her heart skip a beat. "Honey, eat your breakfast. You don't want to be late for Mrs. Thompson's." Lena carefully slid the eggs onto a chipped blue plate, adding a piece of toast and some apple slices. She tried to keep her voice steady, but worry gnawed at her insides. As she walked to work. Whispers followed her down the street. Mrs. Peterson and her friend quickly crossed to the other side, their heads bent together in conversation. Even old Mr. Jenkins, who usually gave her a friendly wave from his porch, just stared with disapproving eyes. At the Holloway's mansion, where she worked as a maid, the atmosphere was thick with tension. In the kitchen, she overheard the cook and another maid talking in hushed voices. "Did you hear?" At the charity auction, she actually thought Grant Whitmore chose her. The cook's voice dripped with mockery. "Getting above herself, if you ask me," the other maid replied. "These people, always pretending to be something they're not." Lena gripped her cleaning supplies tighter, lifting her chin as she walked past them. She wouldn't let them see her cry. Across town, in his luxurious office, Grant sat with his head in his hands. His best friend, Thomas, leaned against the desk. Concern etched on his face. "I can't stop thinking about it, Tom," Grant admitted. "The timing fits." "And his eyes, they're exactly like my mother's," Thomas sighed. "But surely you'd remember if it was that summer, 5 years ago, when I was grieving Sarah's death." Lena worked at the country club. "She was kind to me when I was at my lowest." Grant's voice grew quiet. "We shared one night. I was drunk, hurting. She helped me home, and Grant, you need to know for sure. This could change everything." Looking out his office window at the setting sun, Grant made his decision. "You're right. I'm going to see her tonight. I need the truth." He stood, straightening his tie with determination. The possibility that he had a son, that he'd missed 5 years of Eli's life, weighed heavily on his heart. He couldn't wait another day to know for certain. The evening sun cast long shadows across Lena's small front porch as 3 sharp knocks echoed through the house. Her heart raced as she approached the door, already knowing who stood on the other side. She took a deep breath, smoothed her dress, and opened it slowly. Grant Whitmore stood there, his normally confident posture now uncertain. His tailored suit looked out of place against the worn welcome mat and peeling paint of her modest home. "May I come in?" he asked softly. Lena hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside to let him enter. The moment the door opened wider, little Eli came bounding down the hallway, his face lighting up at the sight of Grant. "Look what I got," Eli exclaimed, holding up a small red toy car. "Mommy got it for my birthday." He pushed the car along the coffee table, making engine noises with his mouth. Grant's eyes softened as he watched the boy play. "That's quite a nice car you have there," he said, kneeling down to Eli's level. "Eli..." "Honey," Lena said gently, "why don't you go play in your room for a little while? The grown-ups need to talk." Once Eli had disappeared down the hall, Grant turned to face Lena. The silence between them felt heavy with unspoken words. "I need to know the truth," Grant said finally. "About that night? About Eli?" Lena sank into her worn armchair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "It was at the 4th of July party at the country club. I was working there for the summer." Her voice trembled slightly. "That drunk man wouldn't leave me alone. He stepped in, got him away from me, offered to drive me home since I was shaken up." Grant nodded slowly, remembering. "We talked for hours in my car. You were so kind," Lena continued, tears welling in her eyes. "For once someone saw me as a person, not just a help." One thing led to another. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "When I found out I was pregnant, I was scared. I knew no one would believe that a man like you would." She trailed off, unable to finish. Grant stood by the window, his shoulders tense. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Would you have believed me?" Lena asked quietly. A poor black maid claiming a rich white businessman was her baby's father? Everyone would have said I was lying, trying to get money. Grant turned to face her, his expression pained but determined. "I want to be part of his life, Lena, if you'll allow it." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility and fear. History and Hope. Saturday morning arrived with golden sunshine streaming through the windows of Lena's modest home. She stood at the window, arms crossed, watching as Grant's sleek black car pulled into her driveway right on time at 8 o'clock. Her heart twisted with a mixture of worry and hope as Eli bounced excitedly by the front door, his small backpack filled with his favorite toy cars. "Remember your manners," Lena reminded gently, straightening Eli's collar one last time. "And stay close to Mr. Whitmore." "I will, Mommy," Eli promised, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. When Grant knocked, Eli flung open the door before Lena could reach it. Grant stood there in casual clothes, a sight Lena hadn't seen before, wearing jeans and a light blue button-down shirt that made him look more approachable than his usual business suits. "Ready for some pancakes, buddy?" Grant asked with a warm smile. Eli nodded enthusiastically, already reaching for Grant's hand. The gesture seemed to catch Grant off guard, but his fingers curled protectively around Eli's smaller ones. Lena walked them to the door. her expression a careful mask of composure. Have him back by 11. Please. You have my word, Grant assured her softly. She watched from behind the living room curtain as Grant helped Eli into the car, making sure his seatbelt was secure. The sight of them together, Eli chattering away and Grant listening intently, made her throat tight with emotion. At Sally's diner downtown. The bell chimed as they entered. The Saturday morning crowd turned to stare, some with kind curiosity, others with barely concealed judgment at the sight of the town's wealthiest businessman with a small black child. Grant kept a protective hand on Eli's shoulder as they slid into a red vinyl booth. Can I have chocolate chip pancakes? Eli asked hopefully, kneeling on the seat to see the menu better. Of course, Grant replied. And maybe some bacon too? Their waitress, an older woman named Betty, approached with a genuine smile. Well, what do we have here? Are you just the cutest thing? She cooed at Eli, who grinned shyly. As they waited for their food. Grant pulled out a sheet of paper from his pocket. Want to learn how to make something cool? He asked. Eli nodded eagerly. Step by step. Grant showed him how to fold a paper airplane, his large hands guiding Eli's smaller ones through each crease. Other diners continued to steal glances. Some disapproving whispers carried across the room, but Grant remained focused entirely on Eli's delight. When their pancakes arrived, Eli's eyes grew wide at the tower of chocolate chip goodness. Grant helped him cut them into bite-sized pieces, and they spent the next hour sharing laughs and stories. Eli proudly showed Grant each of the toy cars he'd brought along, making engine noises as he drove them between the syrup bottle and salt shaker. Back at Lena's house, Eli threw his arms around Grant's waist before heading inside. I like you, he whispered, face pressed against Grant's shirt. Grant's carefully constructed walls crumbled completely at those simple words. His hand trembled slightly as he patted Eli's back, his heart opening to an emotion he hadn't expected to feel. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear as Lena and Eli made their way to the small white church on Cedar Street. They slipped quietly into their usual spot in the back pew, where Lena had sat every Sunday for the past 7 years. Eli clutched his children's Bible, decorated with colorful stickers. As he settled beside her. The whispers started almost immediately. Lena could hear them clearly, despite the soft organ music playing. Did you hear about her and that billionaire? The nerve of some people trying to trap a wealthy man. Eli seemed oblivious to the harsh words. Happily coloring in his Bible activity book. But Lena felt each whisper like a sharp pinprick. She kept her eyes forward, focusing on the wooden cross above the altar, trying to find peace in its familiar shape. Suddenly a hush fell over the congregation. Footsteps echoed down the aisle, and Lena looked up to see Grant Whitmore, dressed impeccably in a dark suit, walking directly toward their pew. Without hesitation, he slid in beside them. Good morning, he said warmly, giving Eli a gentle pat on the head. May I join you? Eli beamed up at him. Look at my drawing, he whispered excitedly, showing Grant his colored picture of Noah's Ark. Throughout the service, Lena could feel the stares, but Grant's presence beside them acted like a shield. When the final hymn ended, Grant stood and asked to address the congregation. Pastor Matthews nodded, though his expression showed surprise. Grant's voice rang clear and strong through the church. I want to speak about respect and judgment. Lena Johnson is one of the most hardworking, dignified people I know. She deserves your respect, not your whispers. Judge not, lest you be judged. Isn't that what we learned today? Mrs. Henderson, who had taught Sunday school for 40 years, stood up and applauded. All said, young man. Several other senior members nodded approvingly, their faces warm with support. However, Lena noticed Mrs. Parker and her friends exchanging dark looks, their lips pressed into thin lines of disapproval. After the service, as they walked toward home, Eli skipped ahead, chasing butterflies in the warm morning air. Lena found herself marveling at how different she felt. Grant walked beside them, his presence steady and reassuring. For the first time in years, she didn't hurry home with her head down, avoiding eyes. Instead, she walked tall, surprised by the feeling of safety that Grant's company provided. Lena's heart pounded as she stood before Grant's sprawling mansion on Monday morning. her small son's hand clutched tightly in hers. The manicured lawn stretched out before them like a green carpet, dotted with perfectly trimmed rose bushes. Eli's eyes widened at the sight of the grand house. It's like a castle, Mommy. He whispered excitedly. Grant opened the door himself, dressed casually in a light blue shirt and khakis, looking more approachable than his usual business attire. "Welcome," he said warmly, ushering them into the high-ceilinged foyer. "I thought we could talk in the study." The study was cozy despite its size, with leather chairs and walls lined with books. Eli immediately gravitated toward a model airplane displayed on one of the shelves. "Lena," Grant began gently, once they were seated, "I've been thinking, for everyone's sake, especially Eli's, maybe we should consider getting a test. To know for certain." Lena's throat tightened. She'd been expecting this, but it still made her nervous. I understand," she managed. "But what happens after? What will it mean for Eli?" Grant leaned forward, his expression sincere. "Whatever the results, I want to be part of his life." But knowing for sure would help us plan for his future. As they discussed the details, Eli played contentedly with some toy cars Grant had thoughtfully placed out for him. The following days stretched long with waiting. Grant proved true to his word, visiting often. He'd bring new books for Eli, teach him to play catch in the backyard, or simply sit and build with blocks together. One memorable afternoon, Grant arrived with a remote control airplane. Eli's delighted squeals filled the air as they flew it together in the park, Grant patiently teaching him how to control it. Lena watched from a nearby bench, seeing the trust grow between them with each passing day. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the envelope arrived. They gathered once again in Grant's study, the afternoon sun streaming through tall windows. With trembling hands, Grant opened the results, his eyes filled with tears as he read. "Eli is my son," he said softly. Looking up at Lena. Lena began to weep, years of uncertainty and loneliness breaking free. Grant crossed the room and knelt before Eli, who looked confused by the adult's emotional display. "Eli," Grant said, voice thick with emotion, "I'm your daddy." He opened his arms, and Eli walked into them without hesitation, as natural as breathing. As she watched them embrace, Lena felt hope bloom in her heart like a flower reaching for the sun. The truth was finally out, and with it came the promise of a new beginning. The elegant dining room of Grant Whitmore's estate stretched before Lena like something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light across the polished mahogany table, which could easily seat 20 people. Fine china and gleaming silverware marked each place setting. Lena smoothed her simple dress nervously, feeling out of place among such grandeur. Eli, however, showed no such hesitation. His eyes sparkled with wonder as he bounced in his chair, carefully touching each piece of silverware with curious fingers. "Which fork do I use first?" he asked, making Grant chuckle warmly from his seat at the head of the table. "Start from the outside and work your way in," Grant explained kindly, demonstrating with his own utensils. "But don't worry too much about it, son. The most important thing is that we're here together." The word "son" made Lena's heart skip a beat. She watched as Grant interacted with Eli, answering each of the boys' eager questions about the paintings on the walls and the crystal glasses. Their connection was undeniable, growing stronger with each passing moment. As the staff cleared away the dinner plates and brought out dessert, a decadent chocolate cake that made Eli's eyes grow wide, Grant cleared his throat. His expression grew serious but tender. "Lena," he began, setting down his dessert fork, "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About Eli, about you, about us." He paused, his eyes meeting hers across the table. "I want to acknowledge Eli publicly as my son. No more hiding, no more whispers. He deserves to hold his head high and know who he is." Lena's hands trembled in her lap. "But the scandal," she started. "I don't care about scandal," Grant said firmly. "What I care about is doing what's right. And that includes honoring you, Lena. Not as a servant, not as someone beneath me, but as my equal." His voice softened. "In fact, if you'll have me, I'd like to make it official." To make us a real family? Lena's breath caught in her throat. Was he suggesting? I know it might seem sudden, Grant continued, but I'm asking you to consider marriage. Not just for Eli's sake, but because I've grown to care for you deeply. For the first time since that night years ago, Lena allowed herself to dream. To imagine a future where she didn't have to struggle alone, where Eli could have both parents, where love might actually be possible. But before she could respond, bright flashes lit up the dining room windows. The unmistakable sound of cameras clicking penetrated the peaceful moment. Voices called out from outside, and car doors slammed. The press had found them. The morning sun cast harsh shadows across Lena's kitchen table as she stared at the newspaper headlines in horror. Maid traps billionaire screamed from the front page in bold letters, accompanied by a grainy photo of her and Grant at the church. Her hands trembled as she quickly folded the paper, trying to hide it before Eli could see, but the cruel whispers followed them everywhere. At Eli's elementary school, Lena heard the other mothers whispering behind their hands as she dropped him off. Gold digger, one hissed. Using that poor child to trap a rich man. Eli came home that afternoon with slumped shoulders and red-rimmed eyes. Tommy said, I'm not really Mr. Grant's son, he mumbled. He said his mom told him you're just trying to get money. Lena's heart shattered as she pulled her son close. Don't listen to them, baby, she whispered. Though her own voice shook, her phone buzzed constantly with notifications as social media exploded with mockery and judgment. Cruel memes spread like wildfire, twisting her story into something ugly and false. She couldn't bear to look anymore. Then came the call that broke her completely. Grant's voice was strained as he explained that his company's board of directors had called an emergency meeting. They're concerned about appearances, he said heavily. They think this situation could damage investor confidence. They want me to distance myself, at least publicly. I understand, Lena replied softly, though her chest felt tight with pain. I never meant for any of this to happen. I never wanted to hurt your reputation or your business, Lena. Wait, Grant started, but she had already hung up. Over the next few days, she let his calls go to voicemail. Each time her phone rang, the guilt grew heavier. She had destroyed this good man's life with her truth. Every headline reminded her that she should have kept quiet, should have protected Eli from this cruel spotlight. When Grant tried to visit, she pretended not to be home, watching through the curtains as he stood on her porch, looking lost and confused. It broke her heart, but she convinced herself it was for the best. He deserved better than the scandal she had brought to his life. That night, as she lay in bed trying to muffle her sobs with her pillow, her bedroom door creaked open. Eli's small figure appeared in the doorway, clutching his stuffed bear. Mommy? His voice wavered in the darkness. Will Mr. Grant still be my daddy? The innocent question only made her cry harder as she pulled her son close, having no answer to give him. Grant sat in his mahogany-lined office. Newspapers spread across his desk like fallen autumn leaves. Each headline cut deeper than the last. Whitmore Empire in scandal. Billionaire's secret love child. Society shocked by Maid's claims. His oldest friend and business partner, Thomas, paced by the window. Grant, you have to think about this carefully. The board is worried. Investors are nervous. Your reputation. My reputation, Grant echoed hollowly, running his fingers through his graying hair. His eyes drifted to the photo on his desk. Sarah, his late wife, smiling at their wedding 20 years ago. The memory of her final days in the hospital still haunted him. Sarah would have wanted me to be happy, he said softly. Sarah would have wanted you to protect everything you've built, Thomas countered. You have to choose, Grant, your reputation or this situation with Lena. Grant stood and walked to the window, watching the city bustle below. The past 5 years since Sarah's death had been a fog of empty charity galas and hollow business victories. But then there was Eli's laugh, bright as sunshine, and Lena's quiet strength that touched something deep in his soul. When Sarah died, Grant said, his voice thick with emotion, I thought I'd never feel whole again. I buried myself in work and appearances and what everyone expected of me. He turned to face Thomas. But when Eli shows me his drawings, When he calls me daddy, with such hope in his eyes, that's real, Thomas. When Lena looks at me, not as a billionaire, but just as a man trying to do right, he shook his head. I found something genuine in their love. Thomas sighed, picking up one of the newspapers. The press will tear you apart. The society crowd will turn their backs. Are you ready for that? Grant's eyes fell on another photo on his desk, a new one, taken just last week. Eli on his shoulders at the park, both of them laughing, while Lena watched with a gentle smile. The joy in that moment was worth more than all his business empire. I've made my decision, Grant said firmly, straightening his shoulders. I'm going to stand by them publicly. I'll face whatever comes. He began gathering the newspapers, crumpling them decisively. It's time I stopped hiding behind wealth and status, and started standing up for what matters most, love. Thomas watched his friend with a mixture of concern and admiration. You sure about this? More sure than I've been about anything in years, Grant replied, his voice steady with conviction. My reputation can weather the storm. But I won't lose this chance at real happiness, not for all the money in the world. The Civic Hall buzzed with whispers as Millbrook's elite filled the wooden pews. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the crowd dressed in their finest suits and pearls. Judge Holloway sat in the front row, a smug smile playing on his lips as he watched Grant Whitmore approach the podium. Lena Johnson sat in the back row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Eli, dressed in his Sunday best, fidgeted beside her. The weight of hundreds of eyes fell upon them, some curious, others hostile. He'll put this nonsense to rest. One society woman whispered loudly enough for Lena to hear. A man like Grant Whitmore would never. Grant cleared his throat, and the room fell silent. He stood tall at the podium, his blue eyes scanning the crowd before settling on Lena and Eli with unexpected warmth. I've called this meeting, he began, his voice steady and clear, because it's time for truth in our town. Not the kind of truth that makes us comfortable, but the kind that sets us free. The audience leaned forward, anticipating the denouncement they'd been waiting for. Instead, Grant smiled and said, I want to introduce you to my son, Eli Johnson. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Judge Holloway's smile vanished. Yes, my son, Grant continued, his voice growing stronger. A bright, loving boy who has taught me more about joy in these past weeks than I've learned in years of business success. And his mother, Lena Johnson, he gestured to where she sat, is one of the most dignified, graceful women I've ever known. Tears began rolling down Lena's cheeks as Grant continued. I've watched this town mock her, whisper about her, treat her as less than human. And I've been guilty too of silence, of hiding behind my wealth and position instead of standing up for what's right. He gripped the podium tighter. But today that changes. The prejudice poisoning our town stops now. We're better than this. We must be better than this. To everyone's surprise, old Mrs. Bedford, the banker's widow, stood up and started clapping. Then the Reverend's wife joined in. Soon, half the room was applauding, while others sat in stunned silence. Grant stepped down from the podium and walked straight to where Lena sat. He extended his hand to her, his eyes full of tenderness and determination. Lena's hand trembled as she placed it in his, but Grant's grip was firm and sure. He helped her to her feet, standing proudly beside her before the entire town. Refusing to let go of her hand, the weeks passed like gentle waves washing away the harsh lines drawn in the sand. Where there had once been pointed fingers and whispered mockery, understanding slowly began to bloom. At church each Sunday, Lena noticed more genuine smiles, more warm greetings. Mrs. Peterson, who had once clutched her purse tighter when Lena passed, now saved her a seat in the third pew. Mr. Thompson, the grocery store owner, started greeting her by name instead of avoiding eye contact. The change was most visible at Eli's school. The little boy came home with bright stories about playing baseball at recess and being invited to birthday parties. His teacher reported that he was thriving, making new friends, and showing leadership qualities in class projects. One particularly beautiful Sunday morning, the church was filled to capacity. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. Lena sat with Eli, both dressed in their Sunday best. Listening to the final hymn. As the last notes faded, Grant stepped forward from his usual spot beside them. He moved to stand at the front of the church, turning to face the congregation. His voice, steady and clear, filled the sacred space. "Before we end today's service, I'd like to say something," Grant announced. "Many of you have witnessed the journey our families have taken these past months. You've seen how love can bridge any divide when we open our hearts to God's guidance." He walked to where Lena sat, took her hand, and guided her to stand beside him. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. "Lena Johnson," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you taught me more about dignity, strength, and true faith than anyone I've ever known." He dropped to one knee, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring. "This isn't just a proposal of marriage. It's a promise of partnership, of respect, of standing together as equals before God in our community. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears spilled down Lena's cheeks as she looked at the man kneeling before her. Not the wealthy businessman the cow knew, but the gentle soul who had won her heart with his kindness and integrity. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Yes." The church erupted in applause and cheers. Several elderly women dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. Even Judge Holloway, sitting in the back, was nodding with approval. Before Grant could slip the ring on Lena's finger, a small figure darted forward from the pew. Eli launched himself into Grant's arms, nearly knocking him over. "Daddy," he shouted joyfully, wrapping his arms around Grant's neck as the applause grew even louder. The morning sun painted golden streaks through the stained glass windows of the church, casting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. The sanctuary buzzed with excitement, packed with faces both familiar and new. This time, there was no mockery, no cruel whispers, only genuine joy and support filling every corner. Judge Holloway stood at the altar, his usual smugness replaced by a humble demeanor. His hands trembled slightly as he arranged his notes, remembering his own cruel joke that had started this journey. The same man who had once used his position to ridicule now stood ready to unite two hearts in love. The organ music swelled, and all heads turned toward the back of the church. Little Eli appeared first, proudly carrying a small velvet pillow with 2 golden rings. His suit matched Grant's perfectly, and his face beamed with pure happiness as he carefully made his way down the aisle. Then Lena appeared, and the collective gasp of appreciation filled the air. Her gown was simple but elegant, ivory silk that flowed like water, with delicate lace at the shoulders. She wore no elaborate jewelry, just a single pearl pendant at her throat. But it was her radiance that caught everyone's attention, the glow of joy that made her more beautiful than any diamond could. Grant stood at the altar, his eyes filling with tears as he watched his bride approach. Gone was the wealthy businessman's careful reserve. In its place was raw emotion, pure love written across his face. When Lena reached him, he took her hands in his. Squeezing them gently, Judge Holloway cleared his throat and began the ceremony. His voice, usually so commanding, was soft with emotion as he spoke of love's power to transform and heal. When it came time for the vows, Grant's voice rang clear and strong. "Lena, you've taught me what true dignity looks like. You and Eli have filled an emptiness I didn't even know I had. I pledge to love you both, to honor you, to stand beside you always, not as your protector, but as your partner." Lena's voice trembled but held firm as she responded. "Grant, you saw me when others looked away. You gave me strength when I felt weak. I promise to love you, trust you, and walk beside you for all our days." Eli handed over the rings, beaming as his parents exchanged them. Tears and smiles spread through the congregation as Judge Holloway pronounced them husband and wife. Applause erupted, echoing off the church walls as they turned to face their guests. Grant took Lena's hand in his right and Eli's in his left. Together, they walked down the aisle toward the bright sunlight, streaming through the open church doors. Just as they reached the threshold, Eli looked up at both his parents. his face glowing with joy. We're a family now, he said simply. Grant and Lena smiled through their tears, their hearts too full for words. Their story of love and redemption was complete, transformed by grace from society's scorn to love's triumph. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.